All right. Meeting of the Scituate Board of Health, Monday, May 9th, Selectmen's Chambers, Town Hall, 6 p.m. I will take a motion to open the meeting and accept the agenda.
Make a motion to open the meeting and make a motion to accept the agenda of Monday, May 9th, 2016.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. First up, the one and only thing on our agenda for tonight, discussion and draft of private well regulations.
Just want to pass it.
And the floor is Jen.
Okay, so we have taken a bit of a hiatus from developing the town's private well regulations, and I just kind of wanted to bring it back to the forefront of all of our attentions and activity, so that we can hopefully move forward to finalizing and promulgating the regulations that we have spent so long drafting. So I provide you with our current draft and wanted to review with you what I believe to be outstanding items to get back to, and then some potential assistance that we can receive. So, as you all know, Mass DEP, as part of our development process, we've relied in part on their model Board of Health regulations, and then subsequently looked at more than a dozen neighboring towns, communities, and then some other towns beyond our own neighbors for who's doing what in terms of best practice, and the level of oversight in the process, from permitting to installing to usage, sampling, and abandonment. So we have a few items to follow up on. For example, at the last time we met, there were several recommendations provided to us by various stakeholders, including looking at Pembroke's well testing regarding nitrates, and their testing requirements to be annual for private wells. It was recommended to us that we look at New Hampshire's Water Well Board for best practices, since they kind of have a statewide program as opposed to town by town or regionalized regulations. It was also recommended that we look at both Danvers and Stoughton for their use restriction, and also Norwell specifically for their abandonment process. Since we reviewed these, I had done a little bit of research, since one of the major items that we have been talking about as a group and with stakeholders is use restrictions. So almost all, if not all, of the private well regulations do not get into the topic of use. It's installation, permitting, sampling, construction, focusing on the health and safety of the well itself and the occupants who would be using the well for various needs. So I did some research to see,
May I interrupt you?
of course.
The only other use, I think, from what you're saying, would be defined as between irrigation and potable.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But that's it?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
That's kind of how I interpreted it. I didn't think you quite said it.
Yep,
Gotcha.
between those two usages. So, and restrictions on that use being the discussion that we've had with multiple stakeholders on restricting the use of irrigation wells to numbers of days, days of week, hours of day, etc. So I did some research to that end to see who is restricting usage and how. So I haven't found the bylaw yet, but it appears as though there is one town that has, and they even specifically call out being unique, that their water use restriction bylaw is unique in that it restricts private well users in the same way that public water users are restricted for irrigation
What town is
usages. Middleton. But most restrictions of any kind seem to be through a bylaw as opposed to the regulations themselves. Not to say that it couldn't be either way, but that's what I've been finding.
Did you reach out to any other health agents?
I've reached out to health agents through the process over the last, 9 months or so, about their regulations. Some of the regulations are old, some of the regulations are relatively new, like Cohasset's, I believe, were issued in 2013, I think, so relatively recent. They modeled theirs after Hingham for the most part. So many of the regulations are recent. So as for timing, we received an email, I think I might have given you all my copy, but we received, thank you, an email from the Massachusetts Groundwater Association just last weekend on April 30th. And they indicated that Mass DEP, who had developed these model Board of Health regulations, were revisiting them. So Mass DEP, with the assistance of this Massachusetts Groundwater Association, has been reviewing them so that they can issue updated model regulations for boards and towns based on what they have been seeing that has worked well, not worked well, and where the science is going. And my understanding, I had a brief conversation with Paul Blaine, who is the contact for the Groundwater Association. They have been working very closely with Mass DEP to revise these. Mass DEP is going through a final review before they release them to local boards of health. Their plan at the Massachusetts Groundwater Association is to provide these to the local Board of Health once released by Mass DEP and offer specific guidance to each of the towns looking to either create or revise their own well regulations. So they are made up a group, as it sounds, of groundwater professionals, whether they are hydrologists, hydrogeologists, engineers, well drillers, etc. And they are willing to assist the towns that are requesting their services to help guide them through this process based on the Model Board of Health regulations. So he indicated to me that he was going to be getting back to each of the towns that expressed interest in the next week or two to kind of start the process of working with towns who may request it. So I am looking forward to getting that correspondence started and taking what we have and hopefully reviewing it with them and getting guidance from them, since they are acting, with DEP to assist towns.
Sounds like a resource that should be used.
Absolutely, and
Since it's there.
Right.
No need to ignore it, I think that would be foolish.
yep, it's
They're in
pretty
the
timely.
process of updating, so when was the last time that they had an update? Or when were their last revisions, or so on and so forth?
It has been many years, just like all of their regulations themselves. So Mass DEP is going through a process of, under Charlie Baker, he had ordered that all state regulations be reviewed, revised, updated, and re-released. So I believe this is probably one of the outcomes of some of that work, is that they realized that what they had been providing is outdated and needed to provide better guidance as the science has improved. So it has been several years that they've revisited many of their regulations or guidelines.
So I am just curious, and maybe you know the answer. Why is Middleton the only proactive one that has the daily restrictions on it? Do you know why?
It's very interesting. I don't know. My guess is their available water resource has not been able to keep up with their growth capacity. I found one other town when I was doing the same research that had enacted this, that, excuse me, wells for irrigation also had restrictions about watering, which matched public water use. In that town,
That was on the Cape,
after about 5 years, they rescinded the bylaw because a lot more residents in town were well owners than public water users. And so in the beginning, I think like a lot of other issues, depending on who shows up at town meeting and who decides to write an article and who gets a citizen's petition. So at that time, they had it for about 5 years, and then the majority of people with the wells got it voted out again. I'm guessing Middleton has found it works, otherwise, and I think one reason they were interesting is that they asked the Attorney General's office for clarification about them even being allowed to do this, and we're told that absolutely, of course you can, and that it's been successful.
Just curious, because they're landlocked, they're not near a body of water,
Right.
or at least the ocean, and I'm not quite sure their population size. The last time I was up there, I do recall it was 114 has drastically added a lot of businesses, big box stores and so on and so forth. So I was just curious. I'm just curious why them of all these other towns, especially some of us who are more, I don't know what the word is, conscious of the environment, and some being close to, waterways and the ocean and so on and so forth, that nobody else has enacted it. I'm just curious, just
Right.
an observation, because, 1 out of 351 towns,
Right.
it's something, just an observation, that's
I
all.
think what we've learned is it's a delicate balance, and it may depend on, for instance, what watershed you're in, what your resources are, one of our wells is offline. If we could bring it back up, we might be able to tap into more water, but it could just be that naturally, they don't have the access to as much drinking water that we do. But again, we know it doesn't take long looking down the road that we're close to our capacity of usage, and we don't want to run
Right.
the risk of
Right.
going over.
Right, and so I assume, because they've enacted that they're not part of the MWRA, they have their own water department, kind of like we do, right?
Probably.
Right,
Yeah.
just curious.
We've looked into that. That's been something that's been suggested. It's extremely expensive.
Right.
And it's really not feasible for us.
Right, right.
What I was reading, so Martha, do you mind? Yeah, so I had been reading that a lot of the towns that had been looking at this specifically comment on their public water supply withdrawal limits,
Right.
and what percentage they were in terms of being close to or above their maximum allowable draw. So I'll pick a number and say 80%, that they were above their allowable limit of 80%. So they looked at their percentage of private well users for drinking water versus private well usage for irrigation purposes, and tried to factor all of that in to creating this bylaw for an overall water withdrawal, as opposed to breaking it out into who's drawing how. It seemed to be that they were trying to lump all of their water users into one number, and seeing what the total number was, so that their public water supply was still within their total withdrawal limits. Is that what your understanding as well?
Yeah. There was a conference on the Cape last year where there were a lot of the hydrologists and the different water professionals from universities, and that was sort of the message they were trying to make sure got across to everybody from all the different towns, which was that, again, one town or another may have the good fortune of naturally occurring more water, but it's a unique situation group by group, depending on how many people in town have wells versus how many people in town have public drinking water coming into their house. Do you still have buildable land? We know that in the pipeline, there are a lot of new homes coming.
Right.
We have to make sure it's only responsible. We can't permit those homes if there's no water to drink. So, and we know that there's a lot of interest from builders to put in more homes, and so we have to make sure it works. It's a fine dance between, and again, some of those homes will want to irrigate, and some of those homes want pools, and so we just have to make sure there's enough water for all the people who live here and all the people who in the future would like to live here. And it's true, it's all one water. I think there's a large misconception that, my next door neighbor's well water does not affect me, which is not true. Just because mine comes from the tap and theirs comes from the well, that doesn't mean it's two different sources of water. Which again, a lot of people don't seem to believe that. And I don't know how else to keep reinforcing everything that we've learned is that it does. It is the same water.
Because of course, some of the feedback that, we have been receiving, on all sides of this issue, particularly with respect to restricting irrigation well usage, is the issue of property rights. And that has come up several times. And, that's more of a legal question than, anything that the board itself could make a decision on. But that's kind of the other side of the coin, is that folks feel that it's their land, they've invested in a private well, they've paid the money, they've done the homework, they've had it installed by a licensed well driller. They're not allowed to use town potable finished water, so what are their options? And there seems to be a camp in the literature that I've been reading that restricting to 1 or 2 days a week actually can cause more water usage, because people feel as though I can water, so I should water. So there's kind of been that counter argument about folks actually use more water out of the watershed by having those number of days or hour limitations.
I suspect Jim's records would prove that's not the case here, and that in the years when we've had to have water restrictions because of not enough rainfall, when we do say, all right, look, it's going to have to be between this hour and this hour, it's only on a day, depending on where you live, that the water consumption goes down dramatically. And particularly once we were able to ask in-ground irrigation system users to go down to 1 day, it went down significantly because those systems use a lot more water. If I have 15 heads doing my yard as opposed to me doing my yard, those 15 heads pump out gallons and gallons and gallons that my yard would be sore by the time I got all that water out. So human beings water the things they really care about, the tomatoes, the roses, whatever it is. Human beings don't water an entire acre of fescue. An irrigation system that's designed to do that, which is turned on to a timer, to operate at, say, like you said, maybe 2 hours. It may have rained Sunday night, and if Monday is their day, they don't override their timer, and it still waters for 2 hours unnecessarily when it rained on Sunday night. So we're just asking people to be smart about how they use their water. And it only seems fair to respect your neighbors, so that if you do have a well and you are using your well water to water, we would just like people to voluntarily, and if they don't do it voluntarily, maybe eventually we have to look into legislating this. If everybody else on your road is on a Tuesday schedule, would you please consider also watering on the Tuesday schedule? It only seems fair. Because we get a lot of grumpy calls from neighbors about, the one green yard. And a lot of people who have wells haven't registered them. They're all supposed to be registered with the water department. There are a lot of people out there with wells that aren't registered, which we find out later, again, through a series of phone calls.
Yeah. And part of our process in the interim, as we kind of set these down in terms of actual physical review, was starting to coordinate with the water department and say, do you have this well on your list? Because we've been finding, as we kind of go through our files and we organize our office better, we've been finding old lists of wells. So we, so I have, this printed out sheet from who knows where. And then as I get phone calls, you know, about people asking about wells, like I bought a house that has an old well, what can I do, what can't I do? So we're, you know, jotting them down. And as part of our draft regulations, there's one entity, really for no other reason than to make sure that if we have septic systems being installed, we're not missing a well unnecessarily and potentially contaminating somebody's well. Part of our regulations are a section that says all pre-existing wells need to be registered. You know, there's nothing in terms of permitting or you know, true documentation other than to tell us you have a well, this is the address, and it's irrigation or it's drinking water, so that we can have that list, have it be consistent between us and the water department. And the other thing that I started to do to find some of these wells is, I'm sure you know that, but Mass DEP has a site called Searchwell. So you can narrow your search, and you can narrow it, the way I've been doing is Scituate, potable, Scituate, irrigation. And if it was drilled by a licensed well driller who are required to report to the state, any paperwork filed with the state is public access. So going through that list and seeing if we have it on our lists, so that, again, so we know really for safety and installation of septic system what's where. So that's another really great tool that we're trying to catch up on. And there's, you know, some anecdotal information. Oh, my neighbor has a well, it's over here. So, you know, again, on the list to confirm its presence or not. So we're kind of working behind the scenes a little bit, even though these have been set down for a little while, to capture some of those things that have been missing over time.
Can I ask you a question? You know, earlier when you were mentioning the research that you did, that so much of what's legislated doesn't fall back on use, it's about installing, permitting, et cetera. As a town, do we test well water on a regular basis? Like does a homeowner bring you a sample?
Well, they will after we make these live. Right? I mean,
I don't think there's anything in place.
There's nothing in place right now.
No, there's nothing
but they will.
Right.
Because, I mean, that's one of the things that I find interesting is that, of course, the water department is testing the water quality constantly and are held to a high standard about what we're providing through the tap. And I think that as a parent, I would want to know if my well water was held up to certain standards. I know that
Well, Martha, we have to walk before we run, so we have to
Yes.
identify the people with the wells and the people that are using them for
Right.
drinking before we can require them to submit tests and/or have testing done for their own
I
health
forget, but I
purposes.
think we talked about once every 5 years or so, once every 10, and then at the sale
Sale.
of a house.
Sale of a
That was the big one, so
Right.
it would inform the new homeowner that they have a well,
Right.
and this is what you're buying.
No.
This is what you got, it's either clean or dirty or needs work or something, but it's almost like a Title V inspection on the septic
that makes a
system.
lot of sense. I know in towns where there are a lot of summer rentals, in order to get your rental certificate, Board of Health issues that, you know, this home has 3 bedrooms, you're allowed to have 6 tenants, you have to have the well tested before you can get your permit. So that in Scituate, where we have a lot of people who do summer rentals, I would think that might be another case to consider, as you said, with a lot of turnover, people going in and out.
Right.
I mean, one family could stay in a house for 50 years and never test the water, which is not ideal, but I suppose that's their prerogative. But again, I don't think that seems safe, particularly.
I don't think we have an issue with that here, because I think any of the houses on the beach or ocean front where there's rentals are probably on town water.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I think our well situation, I think we have one well potable down by the harbor. The rest of them are out in the west end, I'm
Right.
pretty sure.
Right.
That are potable.
Right.
And I believe we have a few on Border Street. So on the
Yeah.
Cohasset end of Border
Yeah,
Street, I
they're
believe
not,
we have a few, I
That's
think.
on vacation.
No, they're not
Right.
vacation homes.
Yeah.
Because that's another source, is just to think about, like, if a realtor, like you said, is going to rent a home, and if that home has, well, that's something that we might want to think about, just for the safety. I mean, people do leave and put, not a beachside weekly rental, put a house up for rent for 6 months, a year, 2 years. And again, I think we're talking a very, very small percentage compared to some other towns, but it's just something to think about.
I think, I see where you're going, and I get the idea of it. I don't know if we could police it.
Right.
That's right.
And one thing I know is not to make a law or a rule that you can't police. It's just, it's, and we wouldn't know if you rented your house. I mean, you don't have to check in here to rent a house, especially if you did it for annual, 2 or 3 years.
Right.
We'd never know. So to have that rule in place, it just would be unenforceable, I think.
Well,
You know?
again, probably only if it was, became an occupancy thing, if it was a house with a septic system that was only designed, say, for 6 people, and if it was being rented.
It goes by bedrooms.
15, right.
Yeah.
If it was a 3-bedroom house.
And we don't police how many people are being rented to. We just don't have the bandwidth.
Right.
I'm a single
No, I meant that
person.
we might only come to you if the septic system fails because of excessive use. But again, I don't think we know a lot of people who have both the septic system and the well, and they obviously have to be far enough apart. I haven't heard of anybody having contaminated their own water here in this town.
And that's part of the registration piece,
Right.
is so that we can get a good handle on how many private wells we currently have, how many are irrigation versus how many are potable,
Mm-hmm.
and then checking through them and making sure that, as you're saying, we don't unknowingly have septic systems so close to private wells that are potable.
Yeah, a lot of this actually came about because of a spike well, to stop somebody from putting in a septic system.
Right,
And we realized we don't have any regulation.
right.
This guideline DEP document from the Groundwater Association, is there a timeline for the release? I know you said you expected to hear back in about a week from Paul, is it Blaine?
Blaine.
Blaine. But does that mean their documents can be done in a week?
I don't know, and he didn't know.
Oh, okay.
So Paul Blaine works with the Massachusetts Groundwater Association. They have been assisting DEP with the revisions. They are undergoing what he described as final review by DEP.
Great, okay.
So he will be reaching out to local boards of health that have requested discussion or input or even just basic consult.
I didn't hear the part about final review, and I was thinking this could be a year-long process.
Well, it could. I mean, it certainly could. We all know.
It most certainly could.
Right, we all know,
Could be 2 years.
Yeah, right. It could,
Yeah, I
it
mean-
most certainly could.
well, I believe, so if in fact this falls under the executive order issued by the governor, and I don't know if it does, but if it does, he set a very specific time frame for each agency to review its regulations. Now, this is not a regulation, it's a model, a guide that they're giving the towns. So it's undergoing review by DEP, it's been in the works for quite some time, is my understanding, and that phone call from the Massachusetts Groundwater Association will give an update, in a week or 2 weeks to any town that had requested, input or guidance.
My gut's telling me
So-
they'll be pretty quick on it, and I
So-
don't think every 351 towns is rewriting their well regulations. So
Right.
I think we're being proactive and doing what we're doing, again, for the benefit that we have nothing. So I think they'll be pretty quick myself.
I'm hopeful.
I'm an optimist though,
Is
so.
Is everything that we're doing going to hinge on that?
No.
Or-
I don't think that it.
No, but it's good input to get from
Yeah, I'm
another
very
source.
curious what they
Yeah,
say.
I think it would be foolish, as I said earlier, not to
Right.
I mean-
look at it, but no, it falls in our lap, I would say.
100%.
I mean, learning from all of the information gained by DEP over the years can only help. And, this has been a lengthy, arduous process. So, the idea being, do it once and have it be the best product it can be, as opposed to promulgating something and then having to go back to it months later, because we've learned more from DEP. So, I think whatever DEP's input we can get, it's only going to strengthen the work that we've already been doing and the conversations we've been having.
Would you like to add anything to the conversation?
I was just curious how things go. All I want to add is that, and I see it in Marshall, that in April, they pump 1.8 million gallons of water. In July, they're pumping 4.5. If somebody puts a well in, that's one person less using the town water. Our opinion there is that by restricting well use, you're just making it worse for the town, because they're permitted by the state how much water they can discharge, and their aquifer is here, you're over there, all the water is coming from as far away as Canada. I mean, there's a boatload of water flowing from the north through this area. To say, we are not California. We are not an area where we have an isolated aquifer. It's recharged all the time. It's like I said, it's coming from Canada. And there's water coming from as far away as upstate New York and Canada. And to say that we're all drawing on the same reservoir, sorry. I've been putting wells in since 1972, put in several thousand wells, and I've never heard of a single one affecting the public water supply, other than to diminish the demand on the water supply. I think if you're in a Zone 2 area, yes, it should be regulated. If you're in an area where it is the town watershed, yes, it should be regulated. But to say that somebody down by the ocean, Scituate, is affecting the water supply, I mean, it's only going to the ocean after that. So, I mean, that was really, if I was to give any input, would be to say that. You're putting way too much into that.
Most of those areas anyways, I don't think could supply a well anyways because of the setbacks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's nearly mute, but I see what you're saying. If you're watering a lawn in Amarok, it's not recharging anything, it's just going into the river on the...
Right. Now, if you were to initiate a regulation limiting the use of the well, I think you're creating a, I don't know, I try not to use the phrases slippery slope and all that other thing, but okay, so what if the town of Norwell says, well, you know, we're gonna start taking more water, you can't have it. I mean, this is the kind of things you're talking about here. If you're restricting it here, well, what's to say Cohasset, which has a private water supply, won't start saying, well, we're going to restrict the use of the town of Scituate because your water is our water. You know, I'm just throwing
Talking
that
about from the
out.
wells.
I'm talking about, when you're talking about restricting the use of private wells, people who have rights to their land, because the only argument I could see to that would be to say that it's all the same, but it's not. And I think that you're going to find that if you do initiate something like that, that there are going to be lawsuits. I mean, Widows Walk Golf Course, for one, their whole business is hinged on their ability to keep the grass green. Now, is the Widows Walk Golf Course affecting the municipal water supply or not? I mean, I think there should be some engineering involved before you start taking away people's livelihoods. And I'm not just saying that because it's my business and it's my trade, and I've been doing it since I was 8 years old. I'm just saying that before you start restricting, you should at least look into that. Come out with blanket regulations that really have no science behind them to back them up.
That's sort of why I asked Martha, and believe me, I'm not swayed one way or the other. That's why I asked Martha why out of the 351 towns in this Commonwealth, only one other has done it. Or done it successfully, for that.
I mean, and if you want to take that a step further, I mean, okay, so let's say that, just for example, that there's a well here, and you're going to restrict it, so what you're saying is this is part of the watershed. Well, there can't be a septic system here because it's part of the watershed. Right? I mean, or is it you can only have it one way? I mean, to say blanket the entire town that's affecting the watershed is not really logical.
So I had looking at our neighbors, I came across a frequently asked questions from Aquarian Water Company, who are the responsible public water supply for Hingham, Hull, and North Cohasset, apparently. And they have an FAQ, basically for the homeowner, about water restrictions in those 3 towns. And one of them is, I use my own private well for irrigations. Do the restrictions apply to me? And the answer from the water company is no, the restrictions do not apply to irrigation systems that are supplied with water from a private well. And they further go into the discussion, why is this water company restricting in the first place? And it said, the company must abide by an annual limit on the amount of water withdrawn from its wells and reservoirs in the Ware River watershed as authorized by the Mass DEP. In 2014, water withdrawals approached 99% of the annual limit. The company is implementing summertime restrictions this year, so this was 2015, to ensure that the annual limit is not exceeded in 2015. So obviously, this was produced in advance of last summer, and there hasn't been an update to see how successful or how diminished their public water withdrawal was. But they were very clear, and they go through, what can you do, what can't you do, and how can you do it. So
If you had a septic, a
private.
a well.
Right, so if you use public water, you had to abide by these restrictions set forth by the water company, just like our water department with, your group's guidance has developed. But it specifically calls out that, restrictions don't apply to irrigation systems associated with private wells. So, trying to see what our neighbors do. It was just one thing that I recently found amongst, also finding the one town that has the bylaw, Middleton, where it goes the other way. So I was finding things on both ends of the spectrum. And then, John, do you mind just saying who you are for the record?
John McHugh.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, my fault.
John McHugh. I own a well company, and I also run the well fields for the town of Marshfield. I have a distribution to be licensed and a treatment license, and this is scuba diving. This water's my life. I'm crazy.
Thanks.
I'm a great public speaker, too.
No, you did a great job.
I'm modest.
And humble, too.
So, Jen, what would you like to see from us? What is the next course of action? Obviously, to wait from the revisions from the state would be one.
Yeah, so I have a punch list that I went through with you guys earlier, some of the recommendations that we took away from the last time, we met and stakeholders provided input, checking in with other towns that were brought to my attention so that I can bring that information back to you, how similar or different they are from what we currently have in place as our draft. So I'd like to be able to bring that forward and have you, refamiliarize and refresh what we've got now, so that when we come together again next time, I assume in 2 weeks, I'll have an update from, hopefully, Groundwater Association, as well as we can kind of tidy up what we think is our 99% draft. And then just as an update as to where we are now, so of course we don't have regulations now, we have nothing. So the only thing that we've been able to do, so we've been getting applications for private wells. We've received less than a half a dozen since we've started this process. So we have been taking the applications on a standardized form and issuing the permits, because we are at the point where we would want to know where the wells are, so that moving forward, we know that they're already registered with us.
And some are potable and some are irrigation?
They've all been irrigation.
Okay.
So I think we've issued 2 permits this year, and I think we have two more in the office pending. So, the decision has been made, have them come in, show us where they are, give us a plan, so that we are aware of where they are. And then once these regulations go into place, whatever restrictions or not are there, we at least have a starting point from the old list of wells plus the ones that are being drilled now.
So they don't have to wait to drill until you're ready with your decision?
There's nothing in place. We have no, right, we have no legal means to either, really, to prevent any kind of installation. As long as they are drilling a well using a licensed well driller, following state requirements.
What John said.
Right, what John
Not a
said.
restricted zone, right.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
So they still, they have to follow the private well guidelines set forward by the state. Am I correct, John?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is definitely an industry standard, and the state has minimum guidelines.
And that's what the wells have to follow at this point.
For the record, I think the minimum guidelines are not adequate. I think that there are distances that should be increased, but they are the minimum guidelines. Some towns, that's all they want. Town hall, whatever the state says, they say. I don't really agree with that, because you get elevated levels of nitrates and children play on lawns. You're too close to a septic system. I don't really, never really condone the distances that could, because human nature, a kid coming back from a ball field in the middle of the summer and a sprinkler's going, they're gonna drink out. So I think that the distances should be distances that will basically prevent that from ever happening.
And you have the ability to be stricter than the state, right?
Yes.
Our choice
Yep.
with all the things. Okay.
Yep.
So I thought.
Yep, you can't be more lax.
All wells
but-
should be at the potable level? Is that kind of what you're hinting to, or alluding to?
I think every attempt should be made if it's not potable. I mean, I could just give you different towns, and like the town of Pembroke requires a 100-foot restriction. If you
No matter what.
cannot achieve it, then you have to come here and
100 foot from septic?
100 feet from the septic system. Now, Hanover requires 50, which makes,
You're what, 50, right?
huh?
January 50, yeah.
Our draft?
50, I think that's what the state is, 50.
Septic pump tank, 50 feet.
Is there a
State's
difference?
25.
Is there a difference potable, non-potable in your experience?
In Pembroke, it's 100 feet.
Regardless.
Either way it goes. What happened in Pembroke is that back in the 80s, trying to keep the story as brief as possible, 2 children get very sick. Playing on the front lawn of a house where the owner basically drilled the well himself 20 feet from the septic tank. And when the children got sick, the owner went to the Board of Health and said, "You should have protected me." So what the town of Pembroke did at the time was they got, the professionals in the industry, everyone had to sit down and, they came up with some fairly good regulations. You got to test the water before you use it. They require annual testing. My wife's office has a well, and every year we test the water. It's not that big an inconvenience, and it's peace of mind going there, because conditions can change
For potable, non-potable, or both?
for both.
Both, okay.
I mean, there's a water testing lab right in Marshall, right?
Yes.
I mean, and it's not that much money.
No,
I
it's just-
understand.
Is that Morel?
But like he says, kid comes home, they're playing in the front lawn, and the water's splashing on them, it's a hot summer day. When you're gonna get it up your nose or in your eyes or in the mouth?
Well, in this
You
case,
don't ingest it one way or the other.
they were just playing on the grass, wet grass. Touch it.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
2 children get very sick.
Oh.
Very sick. The younger of the 2 ended up being blind.
Oh, gosh.
Their fever got up so high.
Wow.
I don't know what that was. Like I said, that was in the 80s. But so that's the dark side. That's why you're here. It's, and I
Well,
applaud
trying to
you.
protect, yeah.
Trying to do that. But on the other side of the coin, if your regulations are too restrict, like she was saying, is there are people they're just going to do it. They're going to do it on the side. They're going
Right.
to do it on weekends. They're going to get somebody from out of state already to drill a rock well. You've got to get a contractor from out of state. There's nobody left. The over-restriction of this has put many people out of business to the point where you can't feed your family. So that would be, if I was to give any caution about, would be if you go too far, you're going to lose all control.
And we certainly don't want,
As with anything,
Right.
Right.
regulation is.
Right.
Right.
And we-
As bad as regulation.
Right.
Right, because then you do have, you know, a situation where you're describing where people want what they want, and they're gonna do it in the dead of night, and,
And I've heard this, I've heard this, I go to houses, every Sunday I look at 11 or 12 jobs, and I hear this. In 1992 in Hingham, if you wanted a well, I backed up and did it. Today, in 1990, you know, in 2016, I say, well, have you hired your engineer yet? You know, have you got an attorney? Well, I just want to water the grass. Well, can't we just do it and say it was there? You know, the house was built in 1920, there was surely no regulations there. Can't we just put it in and if somebody knocks up, just say, well, that was there years ago.
Right.
You know? And that's it in my, I mean, that would be, and Hingham is a town that everyone in this trade uses as the worst case example. You know, as, you know, when I go to other towns, I say, well, at least you're not Hingham. You know, because in the course of a week, I will get 8 to 10 phone calls from Hingham. In the course of a year, I'll drill one well. All right. Well, that's because we're doing it by the rules. But I know of the 8 to 10 I get a week, some of them get their well, they put it in. They either buy the pipe online and do it themselves, or they, you know, get somebody who needs the money bad. Just so, you know, just something to throw out there is that, you know, too much regulation, unnecessary regulation isn't a good thing either.
That makes sense, John. All right, so moving forward, we all know what we need to, you're gonna get us
yep, I have to get you more
regulations, the updated stuff from the state, and we will reconvene in
2 weeks.
2
Yep.
weeks.
Yep,
And I think John Clarkson sent a letter as well with facts, figures, opinions of his own. Because I was asking if he was coming tonight. He said, well, I've already written him a long letter. I don't think they need to hear from me in person since they already heard all my facts, figures, and opinions.
I have,
I'll ask him to double check.
no, it's fine.
He's going through a lot of personal change, job change, and all sorts of things, so.
I have, I think, most recently, a letter regarding the water conservation plan from March 11th, but I will absolutely go back in my emails. Certain absolutely things can get lost in the lengthy things. I flag them and then don't find them again. So I will check my email for sure.
It would have been a very short paragraph at the end of all that other one, because I mean, I think I have that one from March.
11th.
The water conservation plan.
Yep.
Who knows? I mean, he may have tagged it on.
Yep, I will,
As a different attachment.
I will absolutely check and let you know what else I have,
Okay.
so that if I'm missing something or overlook something, I can let you know.
Okay, I'll remind him, because I know he was, just the same thing we've already discussed before, talking about how the Water Management Initiative Act and DEP and everything else, you know, sends us regulations, and that we're all just trying to do the best we can to make sure that, again, it's a little scary when Aquarian is saying we've reached 99% of our, a lot of, we don't want to be there. That's not good. And like you said, sometimes in the summer, we're pumping 4 times as much as we pumped.
Oh, absolutely.
Before that, and that.
Especially with the beachfront houses that they take the plywood off the windows and there they are, you know.
Yeah.
We see it in Marshall, our
Yeah.
highest use is July 3rd, that's the highest use of the day. It's usually about 4.5 million. In the middle of January, we're pumping daily. You can attribute a lot of that to the summer residents, but you can attribute more to, because right now I'm seeing that we're pushing 3 million now, and the summer people haven't come back yet. So you're talking, everyone's turning on their irrigation systems. And that's coming right from the town source.
Right.
Like I said, it just going back to Marshfield, if you consider the Arrowhead neighborhood, the big houses, a lot of people put a lot of money into the big investment into their homes. Now they put on their irrigation systems to keep the greenscapes going. And They don't care what the water rate is. They just want to get it done. Well, if we've had this discussion before, if everyone in that neighborhood put their own well in, we'd see our numbers drop. In the state, the DEP is really on the water department's case to see some conservation. They want to see the numbers go down.
Right.
So, give it what it is. If you spread out the draw, it's going to be a well less impact on one location, 3 or 4 locations.
And is Marshfield seeing installation of private wells?
Yeah, we're starting to, I think that, like I said, going back to Arrowhead area, the water rate isn't that big a concern. So I think when the water rates start going up, you'll see reductions in consumption. We did initiate a voluntary water ban last year, and it was a lot more effective than we thought. I mean, there is a fine line there too, because how do they generate revenue? They sell water. So I don't think I properly answered your question. They are seeing wells, but the water department itself doesn't, has really nothing to do with that. Like here, like you said, the water department has
As the list.
The water department in Marshfield doesn't. The Board of Health has been overseeing that right along for 20, 25 years. So they would probably be the people to ask to see what the numbers are. But there is a lot of interest. And like Weymouth, when the water rates go up, the interest goes up. To the point where,
Of course.
in Weymouth, they want MWRA. And my father used to cut out the articles, he got a kick out of it. They'd say the water rates are going up 100%, but it's temporary. It's never temporary. Because then a year later, it'd be another article saying the water rate's going up another 100%. And then all of a sudden, we started getting 20, 30 phone calls a day in Weymouth. People will then they do the math and they say, well, if I put a well in, we'll pay for the water. In 2 years, the well is paid for. And I think as the rates start rising, we'll see more and more of this. So I think you guys are ahead of the curve. I agree 100%. I mean, the Mass Groundwater Association, yeah, the Mass Groundwater Association started off, it used to be called the Mass Water Well Association. And all it was a bunch of well drillers getting together on Wednesday to get away from their wives and tell their war stories. That's how it started. I know I was a member. But in the last 20 years, it has evolved to the point where now there are hydrologists, there are engineers, so now it's really an organization that's really, like the American Water Works Association, they're really setting a new bar. So I'd be interested what they come up with. Because some of their members are very knowledgeable about aquifers, hydrology, and whatnot. So
Just a quick question, it got me thinking, where there's a limit, whether it's just 4 million gallons, and the state says that's it, you can't pump anymore. Does it matter if you had a dry season or a wet season? I mean,
No.
that number is a number that's pretty steady.
right,
It's set, so if you had a monsoon of a year, the
they're
groundwater level could still be high as much as you're pumping. You could pump 8 million and it's not gonna matter.
they're permitted. Each well site has a number, and it's based on when they initially drilled the well. They didn't drill a 3-foot diameter well initially. Initially, it's usually a 2.5-inch well. They find the source. They're looking for a soil they can extract from. Once they find the source, then they put wells north, south, east, west at different intervals, 25, 50, 150, 300 feet out, and then they do a 24-hour pump test. Sometimes at 48, sometimes at 72. It all depends on the amount of water they're planning on taking. And from there, they check the water levels on the observation wells around the perimeter, and they determine what the curve of influence is, how far the water table is going to drop. And that's where they get their number. So they say, okay, if you're taking 100 gallons a minute and the water table's dropping 8 inches, if you're taking 1,000 gallons a minute, it's going to drop this much. And the idea is not to have an impact on the wetlands, which it does, but the idea is to minimize the impact and not to go out of your protection zone. So that curve of influence isn't supposed to go beyond that 400 feet. And if it is, then the town is obligated to buy the land, which, this is just old school. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, I just know that that's whenever we did municipal water supplies, that's how we did it. And I haven't been involved in the installation since I was a teenager of a municipal water supply.
Now, it just makes me think about the irrigation wells and usage and what water is, like you said earlier, what water is actually being taken.
Right.
But obviously, if there was a statewide or a townwide emergency where water levels were down, then everybody would be shut off.
And now, yeah, I can see that, yeah, it would make sense.
I mean, we have a drought, and it's a definite drought, well, you know, it's affecting everybody.
Well, just on the weather, today, they were talking about, I think in the paper, they were saying that the risk of fire is up. It's been very dry, it's been very windy, and even though we had rain all last week, we're still an inch below our normal rainfall for this time of year. And people were astounded that last year, how can you have 100 inches of measurable snow and still be technically in a drought? We didn't get enough rainfall, moisture, snowfall, wet. So again, the streams, like you said, you've got water coming down from the mountains. We still didn't have enough water last year, despite all that floating snow. So yes, those state numbers, well to well, town to town, are set. And that's one reason why they're after us to, again, replace pipes, catch leaks, conserve, because it doesn't affect just what we're drinking and how many more homes we can build. It's stream flow, it's fish, it's so many other things, like you said, about our wetlands. And again, we're not only morally, we're legally obligated to protect all of those. So I wouldn't want to see us become a town where everybody had an irrigation well, just for the fact that would start to make a huge impact. You know, again, maybe a few irrigation wells, again, I don't know, like a large neighborhood with large lots, large houses that are landscaped, not in a way that's conservative, if they've really gone for water, high water need plants. Some grasses don't need as much water, some gardening techniques don't need as much water. But if you get a whole neighborhood, hundreds of homes, that's an impact.
That's what the state proposed like 10 years ago, that they would come up with new requirements for construction where the landscaping would have to be water friendly.
Yep.
Right, that was, I forget the year.
Concrete.
Yeah.
No, we can't have that
cactus.
either. No, you can't have that either, because the rain pools on the concrete. We want that rainwater to get back into the ground.
But again, we are not, this is not California, we're not the Ocala aquifer that's dropping 20 feet a year. It's not recharging. The aquifer here recharges constantly, and water's coming from hundreds, thousands of miles away. When you start talking about water and bedrock and the cracks in the rock, I mean, that could be coming from the White Mountains in New Hampshire. It could be coming from outside the building too, but
It's just interesting on the numbers, it's got nothing to do with rainfall and daily this and daily that, it's the state set a limit. And like I said, you could have monsoon, but if you reach that limit, the state could shut you down or be upset with you or whatever. It'd be pouring rain for 40 days, don't matter, you're only allowed to pump so much.
in Marshfield, they're watching the Furnace Brook River shed really closely. They've sent college kids to do stuff, but they've sent hydrologists, they've sent geologists, they've sent all kinds of people out to doing studies on the effect. And it's all based on, how much water they're taking. And they're measuring the effects long term. If the usage goes up and the water table drops, then they know that there's an effect there. And these are all things that, aren't really for our generation. the next generation, the one after that. When, like you said, the children are being born every day, the demand is there, it's not gonna go away. But are we gonna say tomorrow that everyone has to tear up their lawns and plant cactus? I don't think it's realistic. So the demand is gonna be there, and there are gonna be, Scituate has there is a certain prestige to living in Scituate. This is not it's no longer a working class town for the most part. And the people who are moving here want the things that they want. They want nice lawns. They want to be able to play volleyball in the backyard. So to say that they're going to be water conservation greenscapes, it's just not going to. It may happen eventually, but I just don't see it happening in our generation. And we are just all passing through, which is a pretty obvious statement. But like I said, at least in these days, to spread the draw makes a lot more sense than to say you can't use that when we're not using, to isolate it so your watershed is the only usable source. I think that's just short-sighted. I don't think that's looking at the big picture. And I really didn't plan on talking to that. I think that come down.
No, your insight's valuable.
Yeah, you were a wealth of information, that's for sure.
You're a guy in the field that's more knowledgeable than somebody sitting at a desk and
100%.
with a slide rule.
100%.
You know anybody who still uses this light bulb?
How about an abacus? I can't believe I remembered the word abacus.
Can I ask you, on your regs, what you decided about, for instance, like rain saving, people putting in, I think we were talking about like cesspool, not cesspools, that's not the word.
Cisterns.
Cisterns, thank you. Seniorities. Because I know you said you had some safety concerns about that, and I know that, again, depending on where you live in the country, rain saving and cistern use is very popular and a good alternative in some places, depending on the rainfall and.
So, the current version, which came out of the last time that we discussed, was that we were going to revise the statement that cisterns shall be prohibited, this is section 12, to above-ground cisterns shall be prohibited. So that it hopefully finds that balance that people can save water, however, it's not a safety problem that, little kids could climb in and drown unnecessarily. So that's been the latest revision in here based on the discussion that we had the last time we met.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
So that's the current.
We've been getting requests for information from people about how, well, again, I want to compromise. I want to be able to water flower gardens, vegetable gardens, grass, everything else, but I don't want to waste my drinking water. And what are some of the other choices? And I know that, again, we didn't want to be pushing people to say, well, go look into a cistern until we knew what you were going to decide and how you were going to do that. Because then we'd like to be able to do the research and have information if people ask us to be able to say, well, you could get rain barrels, you could do this, you could do this.
Well, that's the current draft. I mean, these folks are the ones that ultimately will, decide to adopt or reject each provision,
Right,
and
right.
ultimately the regs as a whole.
We'd love to know what you end up deciding and what you think and how you find what other communities are doing and what you'd like us to help you be proponents of. So if people ask us, all right, so I'm not going to be allowed to do a well, then what can I do? We can start giving them choices and explaining what the options are.
Can I just interject a little bit there? A cistern can also be a beautiful petri dish for bacteria.
That's what I was thinking.
Right, yeah, there's,
Yeah.
It's a beautiful environment.
Standing water, yeah.
right.
And
yeah.
again,
Actually, we discourage standing water for mosquitoes. We
Exactly.
got plenty of mosquito-borne illnesses, and we got the new one now that's probably going to be discussed of
yeah,
very soon, coming up from
Zika.
Zika.
Zika virus.
Because
Yeah, Zika virus.
I'm wondering, I know there's new technology all the time coming out with ways to make these things better and easier, and I'm just wondering, how is that going to affect people who want to have one of those, or communities that already have them? Where will we find, because again, I don't want to see a big swamp. Okay, just curious, so let us know. Do you need anything else, other information? When we have our next meeting, do you want me to tell you?
No, I think this meeting here, and I was told otherwise, we're just kind of reviewing it as a draft, because we haven't looked at it in how many months? It's
Quite
been
a
a
few.
while. We got busy with other stuff, and things happen, and it's important, but it wasn't on the forefront when other things came up, so now we're revisiting it.
And I think it's timely too, that, the delay, although not ideal because we don't have anything in place, but I think the fact that Mass DEP, who issued the original private well guidelines, is revisiting those guidelines, has been taking some of the science, just like you folks do, just like you do in your role, and they're taking that and they've been reviewing and revising so that they can provide us with the best guidance that they can. So, with
Pause might have been
right.
Time perfect.
Time perfect, so that we get the best available science from everyone, from, our local resources to industry to state regulators. I think it's been good timing.
So we sound that good.
Absolutely.
Have they ever thought, going back to finding out where wells on that are, like when the water bills go out, putting something on the water bill if you have a well?
The town of Hampton
We
did
certainly
that
can.
In '92, they put it in, I believe they put it in with the water bill saying you have 12, if you have a well, you have 12 months to register it, or it will be considered abandoned and you can't use it.
I think Jim's trying that, actually. I'll double check, but I believe he
I mean, because
has.
that is a perfect thing to get wells that are registered or whatever.
That would be a perfect way to do it, so that we all get the list that we need within the time
Once you peel the
period.
people off the ceiling when they open the bill, they actually read it and say, oh, yeah.
Well, we were just talking about,
That's a great idea.
Is it possible to add timely messages to the bill, and how complicated is it in the printing process and moving the wording around, and how much extra money does it cost to print on the back, and to see if they actually really turn it over and look at the back? And
Well, the other thing too is if they have their mortgage company paying it, they're probably not even looking at the water bill. It's all into their mortgage sometimes.
Sometimes you get a little colored piece of paper in there if they want to
Yeah.
do some dog license or
Yeah,
Give $1 to voting and,
something, they'll throw a little flyer in there.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost any extra postage, and I would think the printing is
it's.
Yeah, it's easy
easy
printing.
printing, yeah.
Yeah, it just adds up.
Colored paper and boom, catch your eye, what's this?
Right.
And then, and I think, does the town send out the annual water report to residents? I know my town,
Yep.
they send it once a year, so that's another, depending on the timing of all of this, that may be another way to mail it out together.
Well, and it's available in our office. We gave out stacks of them at the Scituate Science Spectacular.
And we have those stacks too.
So, yeah, we make those available to people, lots of different places and ways so that they can get it.
But I was thinking, in terms of the suggestion of how to get the message out to register, either a bill, or if it's more timely that it goes out with the water quality report, whatever way that it's tied in might work. Get that word out to register.
how about voting this week?
That might be a little too
I was
soon.
gonna say, yeah, I'm standing there at the polls tomorrow saying, hey, you got a well? Hey, you got a well? Feel like a Girl Scout.
All right, moving forward, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for all your information and your
Yeah, we
dedication
can
and
talk
work.
about sharing lists. Good. That would be good. Excellent. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
All right, next up on the agenda, other business, administrative invoice approvals. She's probably got some invoices for us to sign.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, John, thank you.
Thank you very much. Jen, anything else while we're doing administrative? If there's anything you'd like to discuss further?
I just figured I would give you the update on the event that we had last weekend. So we had a public education forum centered around hoarding called In a Pursuit of a Life Less Cluttered. It was very well attended by folks from Scituate and across the South Shore. We even had one attendee from the North Shore. We had 40 participants, a very actively engaged audience. We were able to put together a local resource guide in advance for distribution at the event. Our guest speakers were, as always, very dynamic, very engaging with the folks who were in attendance. And for folks who are unable to attend, at some point in the near future, Scituate Community TV was really great in both respecting folks' privacy, but at the same time filming the event for us so that folks who were unable to make it last weekend could view it at a later date, either on their YouTube channel or on Scituate Community TV. So that should be coming soon. So that, as always, a great partner in getting the word out and filming it for future use.
Minutes.
What would you?
No, they were just all of us.
Oh,
Did you read any of my meeting minutes?
sure. That was me.
They want me to do them, but they don't really want to read
Just
them.
the three of us.
Do we need to sign? I mean, I've read them.
Just say
No, we just.
that you
Yeah.
have
Yeah,
no
we
issues
vote on it.
with
I
But,
have no issue.
but we have three separate ones, meaning that.
Yeah, this
Right.
was me
I
and you.
just, I printed 3
That one.
copies of each for you guys.
This is me and you, this is the three of us.
And that's me and you, I think.
That's what's on there.
Yeah.
So I mean, you guys need to show up to more meetings. I'm the common denominator.
And usually you're the one that's in Vegas.
I will be honest, I did not read all these. I did not read all these.
I read this one and that one.
You're in trouble.
Can we vote on the next meeting?
Sure.
Sure. Can you read the emails? Can you read them?
And you can take
the
copies of
copy?
those.
That's
I got 3 copies here, so.
No, but those are 3 of the same, I think.
Yes.
Okay, so, yeah, just,
So share the
Yeah.
group.
But is that,
This is December.
You should play chair.
February.
not on that one?
What's that? All right. What's next one? These are hers. Jen, anything else you'd like to add?
Nope.
All right, I will take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
oh,
I'm sorry.
thank you.
Wanted to ask,
Yeah.
just in the events of last Thursday, or week ago Thursday, we had
I think it was now 2 Thursdays.
2 Thursdays
2 Thursdays ago.
Yes,
900,000 gallons of
yes.
semi-treated sewage dumped into the North River, or
Yes.
the Herring River, excuse me, which is a tributary to the North River.
Yes.
And I just, as a board member, was concerned about lack of,
I called her when I found out about it. The only reason I found about it is because somebody had told me about it before the email actually went out from the town.
well, that's it, I found out
72 hours later.
through the town of Marshfield. 72
hours later after the fact.
And I guess my concern is the, how the public wasn't made aware of it any sooner. And I don't know if it's something the board would be interested in looking at to see if we have another spill like that, that information doesn't get passed out to marinas, other entities, something with people on the water. I mean, I live on the water, I work on the water. I have a very big connection to it. And I have no idea what the impact of that could be to a human. If they were out kayaking, if they were out digging clams. I have friends that legally have dug shellfish and leave it hanging off their dock for a future meal and may not have known this happened and had ingested those, you know? Could it make them sick or could it kill them?
Absolutely. This is something to be started here, but I think this categorizes a little bit above our pay grade. And, you know, if we want to make a issue about it, then we need to go before the select meeting and say, listen. And I'm sure, and I don't know if other people have, but, believe me, I think we should do whatever we can, but I think that somebody, you know, especially with your job or with our job, you know, you're the health agent, you know, I guess you're right, the lack of the communication chain was totally broken up.
Especially the general public. I mean, it was all within the government, but
Right.
what about the general public? I mean, that's what the government's supposed to be protecting. God forbid there's an accident, that's one thing, but not to advertise it, I don't think anybody would be able to scrutinize that. But if somebody gets sick or, like I say, ultimately died because of that, it's a responsibility fall.
Right. Bigger fish.
Yeah. Yeah, so I, like I say, I just bring it before the board. I'm not
No, but so-
hang anybody or crucify anybody.
No,
I think
but-
it's for the future, if God, I don't know how many times this has happened. Who would know? That bothers me too.
That's why I say it's above our pay grade, and
Yeah.
obviously, the higher-ups, somewhere, somehow, it just did not get filtered down to the proper people. And that's why I said this is beyond us. Well, it is involved us, especially her, because she is the health agent in town, but, you know, you weren't notified until a couple of days later, correct?
No, I was notified late morning
Of the-
of,
Because it happened at
Right.
midnight or something, didn't it?
I heard.
so the
6:30 to 7:30.
so the release occurred the Wednesday evening.
And it was a power failure.
It was a power failure, computer failure, and then the alarms failed. So water, the way it was described to me and shown to me, was that water from the clarifiers, so the above-ground water retention basins that you see at the sewer plant, overflowed and continued to overflow overnight with the failure of the computer systems. I think he's the acting superintendent of the sewer department, came in, you know, for his shift Thursday morning, identified the issue, I believe shut things down so that, and I know I'm oversimplifying because I don't know the technical aspects necessarily, but
Well, we shouldn't have to.
stopped the release
Right.
and then started the notification process to state and federal agencies, local town departments, and was working his way through all of the notifications and getting everything back online. So initial notification came out so that we knew something was going on, and then he went back and was working on getting the problem fixed. And then, you know, I went down and he was able to show me what had happened.
And when you went up the chain, what obviously you had to talk to the town administrator about it, and what was the result? And what was the not result?
My understanding is that through the,
It's not just us, it's waterways, it's Conservation Commission,
right.
it's more than one, actually, it's every entity that's been affected, but it's more than one.
But even that intergovernment entity, it's still within the House. It needed to go out
Right.
to the public.
Right.
And like I say, you got mariners, I don't care what time of the year it is, it could be in the middle of January, you could have duck hunters out there, you could have anybody. I just think of splashing water on the hands. A guy said to me, he said he could have sworn he saw, after I mentioned it to him, a foam, different colored water, and the seals, he said, were just acting weird. Like they knew the water wasn't right. They were staying away from this plume. And he says, geez, you know, I never even thought about it until you gave me that phone call. And he's one of my buddies that hangs shellfish off the dock. He
I
says,
can-
man, thanks. I said, I wouldn't touch those. I'd go put them back. I wouldn't even, ugh.
Yeah, I can,
And have they put more checks and balances to them, so it doesn't happen?
so my understanding is that they have been actively engaged, so this was a new computer system, it was getting online, there were failures, so the immediate response was to get that system, to give that system additional checks and balances, making sure the alarms were functioning. I believe they continued to test different scenarios, and it's my understanding that they are working on their protocol, learning, like anything, you would hope that everyone would learn from a situation. So I can certainly go back to the sewer department and the DPW director and see what the process is, what changes they are making in terms of...
Well, that's their business. To me, that's their business.
No, but it's our business to notify.
Right,
general
and, right,
public.
and part of that is the notification process. So what is,
Right.
Are there changes to the process based on experiences this time? And then I can certainly, let you know, or,
Yeah, one of the statements was, well, it didn't happen on July 4th, and obviously we'd shut down the SPED or something. And it doesn't matter. It's any time of the year, there's people using those waterways. Whether it's one person or 100 people, it's just scary. It's scary to know that the general public was not notified. It kind of bothers me.
And that it
wanna
takes
believe
that long.
Government is there to protect you. In this case,
Covered it up. Well,
I wouldn't say covered it up, but they sure weren't quick to divulge or
proactive to
let people know, and I don't think it's upsetting the fact that there was an accident. Accidents happen, unfortunately. It's letting people know so they don't.
Continue to do it.
I
Use it.
can, yeah, I can absolutely check to see, what the communication plan is moving forward and let you know.
Yeah, where it goes. And
Yeah,
you're
I
right,
certainly
it's
do.
a thing to bring to the selectmen. But I hate
Well,
to put
this-
another thing in our lap, but I don't think this is something that happens once a year or twice a year. It might be once every 5 years, but there should be something in place that says, hey,
ABC
Well,
gets done.
once
yeah, different marinas get notified, the postings at the, especially the Driftway, there are a lot of kayakers are in there, and they are there 365 days a year. There are people kayaking that river. I mean, unless it's frozen over.
Right.
There's people using that water, and it might just be a posting. If they read it, they read it. If they don't, they don't.
For people walking their dogs and the dogs run into the
Yep.
pond.
Well, that's it, or they throw a tennis ball in the water, and the person happens to pick that tennis ball up to throw it again, and then they rub their mouth or whatever. There's multiple ways to ingest it, and it just, the more I think about it, the more it...
Well, then I think you're right, just the same way that we're talking that we need to notify the public, maybe it's our responsibility as the Board of Health is to really instill upon the selectmen and the higher-ups that this should have been taken care of better.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
still-
because protocol, well, we did what we were supposed to. We notified this person, that person, that person. Yeah, but you never notified the general
Well,
public.
they did, but it was 72 hours later.
Yeah, well, that's 72 hours later, the whatever contamination was
But
probably...
I also think it's what you said. They weren't thinking, well, this is the time of year when people are near the water.
Right.
Which isn't necessarily true.
Right, right.
I
But the
think-
numbers aren't there using the water, but there's, like I say, there's always somebody using that.
Yeah, and I just think that may have been a disconnect.
Yeah, yeah. And that's it. It's
Yeah.
not looking to just see something for the future. I hope it never happens again. Maybe it might be 10 years, but I think it's something that should be addressed. So, there you go, I spoke my piece. Thank
All
you.
right, Toby, you want to speak anyways?
Nope.
All right, let's take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting of February 1st, May 9th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting over.